Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And we are rolling through the months here. I cannot believe my September birthday month flew by. October's just flown by. And here we are into November, and we're getting into that time of year. I say that time of year where we go shopping. I know people who shop for the holidays in July. A good friend of mine, Melanie, she has stuff like she already has everybody's gifts in July. And I'm the type that will be doing it just about now. Although I do, not to sound like I don't want to put thought into gifts, but like sometimes anymore, you don't. I'd rather give a gift card, even though that might seem like not as personal, if I think they're going to use it versus me trying to figure out what a person likes or their size. I mean, Jim Gaffigan has a funny bit about that. He's like, looking at a sweater, he's like, the size, he's like, no, not even close. And oh, you could take it to the mall and return. He goes, no, I'll just throw it out. And again, I know he's kidding, but seriously, I it's hard to know what people like. If I see something great, I'll pick it up. Otherwise, I'm going gift cards. So I will be doing my shopping soon. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because today, this week, we're going to be talking about finances. And some of this stuff, it might be too late. I know for me, I am really not good with my finances. So I'm going to be grateful for, I'm sure, everything my guest has to share because that's one thing when we talk about, what kids learn in school. I wish I had learned more practical information when I was in school. I really didn't. And shame on me, I know, for not learning more, but I really could definitely use some tips. So this week, my guest is Emily Hickox. And I always like to say how I know my guests. And Emily, I don't even think I had met her in person when we kind of met virtually, I suppose. Emily had commented, I believe, on one of my episodes. And I was just like, yay, someone's listening. And I was super excited to hear from Emily that she had listened to the podcast. And then I saw her out at a Women in Philanthropy event. And for those of you who listen on a regular basis, you might remember Laura Duchesky from the Scranton Area Foundation was on several weeks ago talking about the wonderful Women in Philanthropy program and all the great things it does for the community. So I ran into Emily over the summer. It was so great to see her in person. And we've since seen each other at the NEPA Learning Conference that Scranton Area Foundation put on. Great information. And I said to her, we need to talk finance. Financial tips, anything you can do to help us out would be great. So welcome and thank you so much for joining me today, Emily.
Janine, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, anytime anyone says to me, hey, want to come talk about finance? I'm like, number one, you're probably a little bit crazy like me. And number two, absolutely. But this is such a good time of year. And I have to correct you on something you said, because there is no shame on you for not being more educated on personal finance. I totally agree. This is something that needs to be taught more in school. This needs to be a bigger part of our society. One of the things that I personally have a mission for is to take a lot of the shame and stigma out of talking about finances, talking about money and budgeting. And that really does start in the home and in the schools. And my poor children, they suffer through a lot of budget lessons and they have to, organize their money. And I make them do a lot of things that my parents, who are absolutely amazing, wonderful parents, but they didn't do with us because no one told them to. So I've been fortunate. I'd love to tell you just a little bit about me and my life and how I came to this point of really loving talking about boring things like personal finance. So I did not grow up here. I grew up on Long Island in New York. And I traveled a lot for work. I worked for the government for 15 years. I have a background in accounting, and I did accounting and auditing and all the things with money, all the boring side of money, I will say. And over the years, I just ended up on the other side of the world for a little bit, stationed on an army base in the Middle East. And that's where I met my husband, who was also stationed there with the Pennsylvania National Guard. So we met over there, and then we had to find a way to make life work back stateside. So we did a little bit of hop, skipping, and jumping until we finally found ourselves in Pennsylvania, where he grew up. So he is from here. We live about a mile from my in-laws, so that's fantastic. It's great babysitting benefits to being their grandparents.
I bet, yeah.
They say they love it too, so that's okay.
I'm sure they do, honestly, yeah.
They do. We pay them in love. But yeah, so we've been here since 2019, but we moved here just before the pandemic. So it was really unfortunate that we didn't really get to start building a life until about mid 2022. So now we're starting to, come out and go to events like where you and I have met a few times, and that's really been wonderful. So we live in the Dalton area, and we have two kids, a dog, two cats, one of which is hiding behind me today, and a bunch of chickens. So we've probably got other animals I don't know about. So for a girl from Long Island to have to budget for things like chicken feed, it's kind of crazy. But my husband and I, we had a really cool journey of our personal finance. And we went to a Dave Ramsey course together to learn how to budget together and just how to put our money together and make it work for us, and also how to be debt free. So we went on a really long, grueling, debt free journey many years ago. And I got very obsessed really with this idea of, oh my gosh, like once somebody gave me a blueprint for personal finance, I knew what to do. I had guidance, I had a plan, and I was able to execute it really a lot easier than I thought it would ever be. And
Can
I
I stop you for
yeah.
just a second? For those of us who don't know, and I will say, I feel like I heard that name like a couple years ago. I was grading speeches for Penn Foster online, and I feel like someone did a speech about Dave Ramsey, just so people, in case they
Yeah.
want to look into him. He's nationally known for finance seminars or something? I'm not familiar with him.
Yes, he built the Financial Peace University. So that's one of the core products that he offers. He does a lot in the personal finance world. His whole platform is based on becoming debt free, and that's great. And I super encourage anyone that wants to be debt free to check out his plan and see if it's right for you. But what I learned over the years and kind of going through our journey and walking alongside some other people was that it's not that simple. It's not as simple as let's just get debt free, because we live in a society, especially right now with inflation and the economic environment we're in, that we often spend a lot more than we're making. And that's where the holiday season, what was once a stressful season, becomes an incredibly stressful season, because you've already got this stigma of the holidays of spending a lot of money, and then we're going to throw in there, oh, we're in a really difficult economic time. So what I learned over the years was the importance of not just budgeting and becoming debt free, but managing your credit, managing debt. So it led me down a path of a career change. And a couple of years ago, I left the government and I came to work in the credit counseling industry. And that's been really wonderful for me, just to be able to work in the financial education sector and do things like this, just talking to people and helping them understand how does your life, how can you still have this successful, happy life within the confines of the society that we have, the economics that we have.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that is so important. And I want to thank you for telling me not to shame myself. But I mean, like you, my parents, I'm older than you, so my parents are older, and I love them dearly. I live next door to them, so we are very close. But that is certainly not something they were. I will say they were very good with their money because, working class family, we were not rich by any means, but we also didn't want for things. It's not like we didn't have, clothes, or like we weren't like, oh, I want this, have anything you want. Like some of the kids I see today, literally stepping on things and, oh, we'll just get you another one. That's not, and I've seen that, no joke, in my own like distant family. But like we weren't like that. We didn't grow up like that. But I did see my parents work hard, and I know they didn't overspend, but it's not like we ever had conversations about it, like you said. And it's, in school, I hate to say, I love seeing young women now and girls in STEM programs and math, because I know that's, the old stereotype. I wasn't, and it's not like I'm trying to like portray this stereotype. It's just not where my strengths were, or even interests. I wasn't good at anything really in math. I was a good writer, I was creative, but I wish I had taken a little more initiative in learning about different things, because a budget is so important. And like, I love that you're doing that with your children, though, because it's, we find ourselves, and I don't want to go this to go, because everything tends to turn into like something more political when it shouldn't, like people today using a lot of GoFundMe and different kind of platforms. And I'm not trying to bring shame or anything, but there was a time when people would have savings, right? And they would have savings for things that happened. And now we're relying a lot more on community, generated funds. And again, no shame, but like I think it is important that we're reminded to, yes, live for the moment, but also plan a little bit for the future. And we're not trained that way. And we're not trained, I don't think, to think that way. So I think what you're doing is so important. I think that's great that you're teaching your kids about that, because it's so smart for them to at least even have that idea in their heads early on.
Yeah, it's been really great for them. I see the little things they do that tell me it's paying off. So we were on a camping trip and we went on a little excursion and there was a cute little shop with lots of things. And I watched my kids, they're 6 and 8, and I watched them sit there and look at a whole shelf of toys. And I told them they could each pick one to buy. And they were looking at the prices. And my older child is telling the little one, okay, well, maybe we could ask mom if we could get 2 of these because they're the same price as one of these. And they start having this dialogue about the price of things and they're going to negotiate with me. And I was just like, do it. Negotiate with me. I'm ready. I want this. So I'm always so proud of them when they come up with stuff like that. I'm like, oh no, they get it. They're listening. And the book fair. Our school just had the book fair last week, and they were rating their safes. And then they came to me and they said, we haven't done our chores for next week, but we want a little more money for the book fair. We promise we'll do these next week. Can we have our money now? And I mean, how do you say no to that? Like, they're coming to me and negotiating and asking for advances. I'm like, this is beautiful. So they each got like an extra $2 for the book fair and then bought utter nonsense, which is typically what happens at the book fair. No
Yeah.
one's using that.
That is awesome though that they are thinking that way so young, truly, because I mean, I don't know. I haven't read articles lately, and obviously you would know this about the average American's debt. And I know I have credit card debt. Again, not that I want to beat myself up, but it is debt that I wish I didn't have. And I wish
Yeah.
I had made smarter choices, because the one thing that really gets me, I'll look at, it's not going anywhere. Literally, it doesn't seem to ever come down, and I'm making the amount every month. And sometimes when I can, which is almost always, I try to put a little more on there, but it still seems like that when I look at that interest, I don't even want to look, like the amount that they're charging me in interest. It's like, it's sinful. And I just feel, again, I know it's my own choices and my own responsibility, but yet it seems sometimes that the system is set against us. It's like with the late fees and everything else. And I hope people understand. And just a reminder, if it's, unless you're always late, which, it happens to me probably once a year, maybe twice, most companies will forgive you at least once and say, okay, yeah, we can remove that. But you got to make the call or else they won't do it. So save yourself that $35 if you happen to be late or whatever, because it does happen. But I think about that and I'm like, wow, so I am making my payments, but this one time I forget, here's a $35 charge. And I recently had my car lease ended, and I decided to purchase it. So I got a car loan, and I was frustrated. And I will share this. I don't mind sharing my personal business. I was frustrated that I went for the loan with my credit union, and I'm like, but I pay my bills every month, and sometimes they even put extra on. He goes, yes, but it's your, and you can correct me, I'm probably not going to say this right, your debt to something ratio, right? Where I'm
Equity.
not,
That's it.
yes, I'm not
Yeah.
bringing in enough money for how much debt I have. And I will tell you, that's one thing that kind of, again, me not understanding enough, that frustrated me, because I'm like, it's not like I'm a deadbeat who just doesn't pay my bills. I am paying them every single month. I said, doesn't that count for something? Like and I ended up getting the loan, so thankfully, but he's like, it was close. So I think that's something a lot of people may not understand, and maybe they do. I know I sure didn't.
So you touched on so many things, and we could probably do a whole separate podcast on credit, because that's really what this lends itself to. It's okay to miss some payments, in the sense of you could be forgiven the late fees, but the other piece of missing payments is that timely payments account for 35% of your credit score. So there's a bigger ramification than just I missed the payment, I'm going to have this fee. So if that's happening every once in a while, that every once in a while really does add up when it comes to your credit score. So it might not add up when it comes to your fees. The next biggest thing that's going to impact your credit, one of the next biggest things is that ratio that he was talking about or she was talking about. So when you have a credit card with a $10,000 limit, what's the utilization on that? And if you're only using $1,000 of that 10,000, that's good. If you're using 9,000 of that 10,000, that starts to not look as good, and especially when you compare that to what your income is coming in. So some of these things that it feels like we're doing okay with, we tend to forget the impact on the credit score. And that's where I think we do need a lot of education out there, because no one's sitting around the dinner table saying, oh man, 35% of my credit score is all messed up right now because I missed all these payments. Like, only in my house are those conversations going on at the dinner table. So really, like, talking about it and helping people think it through. The other thing is, I've been giving this really great financial literacy training that was, I think, in part sponsored by WIP originally. It's through Dress for Success Lackawanna. I've had so much fun giving these trainings, but the curriculum, they've had the same curriculum for a few years. So I gave the curriculum the first time, and then when I went to give it the second time, I said, I better go update some of these numbers in there. One of the numbers was the average credit card debt in America right now. And the presentation I was originally giving was somewhere around 8,000. And this summer, when I went to go update that, it was around 11,000. And this is only a year-old curriculum. So there is a significant shift. We are at the highest credit card debt than we've been in probably ever, I think ever. So this is definitely the time to be really talking about the crux of personal finance, which if you spend more than 5 minutes with me, the word is budget. Like, no matter what, the answer is budget. You come to me with any life problem and I'm like, budget, that's the answer. The answer is budget. So that's really where the foundation for success lies, in your ability to take that step back and make a plan. And we do that in so many areas of our lives. Like, if you think about, careers, we make a resume and we fill out all these online profiles that are helping us make a plan. We're strategic in our LinkedIn profiles. We're, when we're going to buy a house, we make all these lists of all the things we want, and we have such a big plan, and we're going to go to this realtor, and we've got it all figured out. And then when it comes to managing, like, the thing that keeps us going, we're like, nah, we'll see what happens. Like, we'll see what tomorrow brings. And we can't be like that. We just can't.
Yeah. And again, I don't mind putting myself under the bus because I am like that. And that's where, and like I said, I might once in a while I'm late. And honestly, it doesn't happen often, but I do pay the bills. But at the same time, I do know that I spend more than I should because I don't budget. And I happen to be in a position that, like, I've chosen things in life that aren't high paying and I have my, own business, and I probably undercharge. And so that's a whole separate conversation,
Yeah.
but it's hard. And I will say, maybe let me ask you, so budget, I know you're going to tell me the answer is budget. And I think I'm afraid to budget because if that were the case, I'd be like, well, I ought to be living on ramen noodles and not leaving the house. And I'm simply not going to do that. But I'm the type, I will spend money on stuff that I don't need, I will admit, but I also spend, and I'm not trying to put a halo above my head because I'm far from that, but I do like to be generous and give gifts, like different girlfriends, we get together, birthdays, get it, not spending a ton, but maybe $25 on a gift card or on something else, on a piece of a pair of earrings. Or so I do that. And I mean, if I were I always say, and I joke, but it's serious, Susie Orman would whip my butt because she'd be like, sister, you should not even be leaving your house. But I like to do that and buy for some of, around the holidays, my friends' children, things like that. And I've always done that. And I've always done that without, again, I'll admit, without a budget, knowing that I, quite frankly, shouldn't. And I think that probably might get some people into trouble too, whether it's for their own family or their extended, wanting to be generous and spending more than is appropriate based on the money that we're bringing in. So without the simple answer of budget, is that the answer?
So the answer is budget, but But the answer isn't that you have to shut the doors and live on ramen. And the reason for that is when I talk with people, and my whole thing is, I'm not here to fix the next 3 months. Like, I'm here to talk to you about the rest of your life. And you can't survive like that for the rest of your life. We have to take that step back and look at the whole picture. And mental health is a very important piece of the financial picture. So we know that your finances have an impact on your mental health, and mental health vice versa has an impact on your finances. So we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we are restricting our lives so much that we're miserable, and that it puts us in a weaker position to handle everything else in life, right? And I'm gonna just play on your ramen noodle thing, and I don't mean to like knock that too much, but what if we really did that? What if we never got out and we lived on, rice and beans, ramen noodles? Like, if we really did that for extended periods of time, what kind of life would we be living? How happy would we be? What would our relationships be like? And what I do want to touch on a little bit today is that when it comes to the holidays, it's important to keep those relationships in mind. Keep the reason for the season at the forefront. Whether it's a religious reason, and even if you're not religious, there's just this wonderful beauty to relationships during the holiday season. So we've got to keep all that in mind, and then balance our budget accordingly. So the other thing is, when people hear budget, they're immediately turned off, and they're like, ugh, restriction, I don't like that. And one of the things I learned, I did a couple of years back, go through Dave Ramsey's financial coach master's training. And one of the greatest things I got out of that was that a budget isn't telling you to like ruin your life. It's not there to make you miserable and so restrictive. It's there for you to tell your money what to do. It's giving you control. And I know, especially for women, generally, we crave that control. So I see a lot of that when I sit down and I talk with my girlfriends, and I talk with other women at work, and anyone I encounter, and especially a lot of other mothers with young children at this time of year. There's so much pressure and there's so much stress around this. And the budget isn't supposed to make it harder. The budget's supposed to make it better. And if you budget long term, those benefits, you really reap that in the long run. I always share with people my budget. I've dubbed it a living budget, totally made up that term, trademark. And basically, it's a spreadsheet that it started in 2010. It goes out to 2029 right now, I think. Every once in a while, I just drag it out a little further. Very simple Excel spreadsheet. But what it does is it budgets by pay period, and I can make a decision today and see what that's going to do to 2029, which is really important for me because I have young kids, and there's going to be tons of unexpected things that come up, and college savings and all that. So I need to know that if I'm going to buy this extra thing, or this new subscription, whatever it is, I need to know what that does to my life 5, 6 years out. So that's the beauty of what I think I built, is I can see what the holiday spending this year is going to do to next summer when my family wants to start traveling again. Well, do we have any money left to do it if we do all these things during the holidays?
That's really smart. Yes, you're giving me a lot to think about, but I love what you said, and it was a few minutes ago, about the other piece too, about the mental health, because you're right. A lot of us, I know myself, I'm instantly, and I joked about staying home with the ramen noodles. I know myself, I couldn't just stay in. I need to connect with people, but I think it's important. And also, as you said too, with the holidays, remember what they're about. It's become super commercial. It doesn't need to be. And even as far as like, oh, so I'll just stay in. Well, we can go out and do all kinds of things that don't have to cost a lot of money. Meeting a friend for a walk, or even grabbing a coffee. Now, granted, coffee's up too, but you could still meet and have like a $3 cup of coffee instead of dinner or whatever. I mean, there are ways where you could still have that fellowship and save some money. So I think that's important too. And you bring up a great point about making it about the relationships. And the thing with that, and I will say that can be tricky because of the society we're in and how it's become over the years. It's so you would be seen maybe, and this is my frame of mind. You're afraid of seeming like the cheap person. You know what I mean? Like the one that's like, well, what if we just do this? Oh, well, then you're being cheap. Or maybe some of your friends bring in more money than you do, or they have a spouse, so they put their money together and they're in a better position or whatever. So all of that, I think sometimes, at least I think of it that way, that comes to mind. But it would be nice if we could get back to focusing on the important things and not feel that pressure or that expectation that, you know what, I better spend a certain amount of money. Yeah, I think that's important. I know you have some do's and don'ts, and I don't know if we've talked about everything yet, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk about that, because before I hit the record button, we had talked about, okay, it's early November when this is out. People might already be done with their shopping, or they might already have, spent their money. So you can help provide some insight that can still be useful next year when they start planning, or taking a look back at this year and going, how did I spend my money? So what are some of those do's and don'ts that we didn't get to?
Absolutely. So one of them, I'm going to jump around in my brain a little bit because I want to expand on something you said about just that feeling of having to talk to people and seem like the cheap one, or whatever stigma and label is going to be put to that. I've personally been there for sure. Felt like I had to buy for everyone, had to kind of, you know, keep up with everyone. I'm sure we've all heard keeping up with the Joneses when we talk
Mm.
about money. And what I think is a really important do for holiday spending is to set boundaries. And those boundaries are going to look a little different for every single person. And especially around gifts, though, what you want to do is you want to decide, who do you really want to buy for? Who is really in this like inner circle of people that you feel incredibly compelled to buy them a gift? You either have something in mind you want to get them, or they're just somebody that you really love to bring joy to their lives in the form of gifts. Often that's children that surrounds, or it's gift cards for adults. But we want to limit that. We want to take a step back and say, well, did I really need to buy for all of my kids' friends, or all of the aunts and uncles and their nieces and nephews on the extended side? Once you make that decision, you've got to, number one, you got to stay firm in it, because once you break the seal, you start buying for everybody. Been there. But we also need to communicate. And something really interesting happened a couple of years ago when I started doing this. My husband and I, and this is a little bit about giving too. We had decided that there was a cause we wanted to give our holiday budget to. And we made the decision that we weren't going to buy gifts for extended family, and instead funnel all that money to the giving that we had chosen. So we had a conversation. We went to, our children's aunts and uncles, and some more extended family beyond grandparents. And we said, hey, we just want to give you a heads up that this is what we're doing this year, so that you don't feel any pressure to buy our children gifts, because we're not going to buy your children gifts. And I was really nervous of how that would go. And you know how it went? They went, oh, thank goodness. We're just having a really tough year. And we were really stressed about all these gifts we had to buy. And I think in this economy, more and more people are feeling that. And it doesn't always matter what your income is. Income doesn't equal net worth and assets. So there's more people than you realize out there saying, oh, I wish I didn't have to buy all these gifts. So we gave them that freedom, not to just not spend that money, but to then turn around and say to us, we're struggling. And then it kind of spawned into this really great conversation about budgeting. And that's what we want to normalize, is talking about what's in our budget, and what can we afford, and how to say no to things. So setting boundaries can be really scary, especially if there is this perception that you do have wealth. I will say that can be really scary, setting those boundaries. The other thing is to set spending limits. So this is best with spouses or significant others. And when you're talking about allocating gifts to children, is to really set those limits on what you're going to spend. It is November, so chances are you've already started spending, and that's okay. So for the people that haven't done any budgeting for the holidays before, and you're listening to me and you're like, this is too overwhelming, I'm not going to do it, I don't want you to stress. What I want people to do is keep track. I want you to look at, what are you actually spending this year? So then you can take some of these tips and apply them next year. So really just keep a spreadsheet. I'll tell you that I have a spreadsheet. tracks all the gifts I buy for people, their name, what I bought, what I spent. And this is so helpful, especially when like 3 years from now, I want to buy them something and I'm not sure if I bought it already. So I go back to my spreadsheet and I'm like, no, I already got that. Don't buy that again. The other tip is to really have a strategy for, and I'm going to speak a little bit to parents because I think that is, and grandparents, because that is one of the more tricky areas to navigate during the holidays. So if you have a strategy for gift giving, are you going to just buy one large gift for each child, one large gift for siblings to share, multiple gifts for each child? And keep track of what you're doing, because there's a lot of us out there that just buy during the year when there's a good sale or it's Prime Day, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we get to December and we're like, oh, well, John has 28 gifts and Elizabeth only has 4. What happened here? And now mostly grandmas have to make it even. So now they got to go buy 20 something gifts to make it even. So that's always a struggle. And then the other do for gifts. Okay, this is my secret weapon, and every parent I have told this to like thanks me so much for it, and I love it. Amazon wish lists. Okay, during the year, so it's November, so this probably isn't going to work for right now. But during the year, whenever kids are saying, "I want, I want, I want," every once in a while, my family gets into a situation where we have to watch cable TV. And cable comes with commercials, and commercials make your kids want to buy things they have never heard of. And it's absolutely terrible. So whenever they see something and they're like, oh, I want, I want, I want, my answer is, okay, put it on your wish list. And they each have an Amazon wish list on my phone. And they, as my son says, search it up. I guess that's like the new lingo for Google. But you search it up and you put it on your wish list. And then if they're out at the store, like I'll go to Target and need to buy, actual things to survive. And they go to the toy aisle and they take my phone and they walk around the toy aisle and just like take pictures of all the things they like. They know now mom's not buying anything because it's not a holiday. So they take pictures and then later they search it up and put it on their Amazon wish list. What I do at the end in like November, I usually do that around this time. I go through their ridiculous wish list and I weed down to what they still talk about, what they still seem interested in by November. And I transfer all of that to a registry. And then the registry is what I send out to anyone that says, oh, I'd like to get your child something for Christmas or for Hanukkah, because we celebrate both. Whatever they say, I just send them the list. And then they don't get duplicates most of the time. I think only once in the last few years. I also get to know who bought what. So when I want to say thank you, I don't forget, especially in the chaos. If you've ever celebrated Hanukkah, it's like 100 gifts at once. So keeping track of who bought what is really hard. So it gives you a way to know who bought what. It also helps you limit what comes into your house. And that, like you said, Janine, earlier about stepping on toys and not caring about them, that is real life, because they get so many things, so many unnecessary things, and really being able to funnel that. And also being comfortable in like setting expectations for family and saying, I've got this Amazon wish list, but my children also have a 529 account or a savings account. Feel free to just make a donation to that.
That's a great idea. Those are wonderful tips. And, when I talk about like so many gifts, I saw that in extended family household when the kids are much older now. This was years ago, but literally just stepping on a gift. And I think it was like a piece of electronics too. So it's like, okay, I don't know if that's going to recover or not. And it's like, that's where and just to throw back to you teach your children about budgeting, that's where, and that could be a whole side conversation or an attachment, not just budgeting, but value, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I think it's unfortunate. I do see that a lot with different families, like wanting to please their kids or be liked by their kids or whatever. And I don't, but I mean, truthfully, it's just giving in or whatever, like, oh, they want this, I'm just going to get it to shut them up, so to speak, because I've seen it with different people. But like, to have them understand, do you understand that was costs this amount of money, and mom and dad work hard, or mom or dad and dad, or whatever, whoever's running the family that gave it to you, work hard for their money, and just understand that it's something that has value and take care of it. You know what I mean? And it's not that easy to replace, because as you get older and you want different things, that mentality is going to, I think, get you in trouble. So that's, I mean, in addition to budgeting, I think there's that piece that we can kind of make sure we teach young people about too, the value too. Yeah.
Absolutely, value and contentment, and they go hand in hand. And I agree, it's a whole nother topic, because there's a lot of really good strategies for doing that, and I see the difference. I'm not gonna by any means claim my children are perfect. By any means, I love them dearly, but they're kids. But I do see a difference in their perception of value compared to some of their friends that we've encountered, and then some where we've tried to portray to our kids, but also to our friends, that it's okay to talk about money and really normalize that conversation. So we've noticed a difference in those children of those parent or those other parents who are willing to have the conversation and say, it'd be great if we could do this trip, but it's not in the budget. And, we can't afford it right now. And I think the word afford has become this really negative term, and it shouldn't be. It's just a fact. There's no emotion in the word afford. It's just a factual term. And we have to make it that. We have to, be able to say that. And I'm always proud when my son comes to me and says, "Well, can we afford this?" And I've gotten some feedback from other parents out there saying, well, you shouldn't make him worry about that. I was like, he's not worried. It's just a fact. It's not anxious. It's not sad or stress. It's, can we afford it? Fact. If it becomes an anxious thing, and there's certainly a lot of anxiety behind money for adults, and you bet it's there for kids too, then yes, we have to step into that. We have to dive into that and manage that. But the more you keep it factual and not emotional, it really helps.
Well, and those are words to live by in so many things, right? Honestly, communication, that's a big thing. Like, take a step back, because I find myself guilty of that. It's like, if you're upset about something, don't respond to the email, because you're answering in emotion, which you could remove and sanitize the message. But no, but that is so important. And before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to say any other tips that you have. But I love what you said about we do need to be comfortable having conversations about money and budgeting, and just being able to talk about it, because you're right, there's so much through the years, like, I mean, it's not exactly polite to be like, so how much money you pulling in? Like, I mean, that's not exactly polite, right? But there's nothing wrong with having conversations about money. And again, this could be, I don't want to start off a whole new Pandora's box, but like the idea of, like, even people, like, I'm self-employed, sharing with one another, well, what do you charge for that service? Because I find, as a solopreneur or whatever, it's challenging for me. It really is. And I will end up like searching the internet. Sometimes I ask professionals. Some people are more willing to share information than others. Others aren't necessarily. So yeah, I think those kind of conversations are so important. I really do. And I love that you're saying too about afford. Let's remove stigma and negativity around certain words, because it's just a fact, like you said. And if you're budgeting, then it's a fact. Okay, can we afford this or not? Right? If you have
Yeah.
that budget, you'll know by looking. So before we wrap up, though, I wanted to go back to you, send it back to you, and say, are there any other tips that you'd like to share, or any other points that you'd like to make that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I probably have like 30 more, but I'll pick two. I'll pick my two favorite. One is about debt. So it's, as I said earlier, it's very hard for us to get through this time without using some kind of debt, because a lot of people are in a situation where they're spending more than they're bringing in, and they're also coming into this season with debt, right? So if the average person has $11,000 of debt, most people are not coming into November debt free and ready to spend with a fully funded emergency fund and savings account. So what I would encourage you to do is just keep that list going. Keep that record this year. Don't stress yourself out too much, but somewhere just keep a notebook or a spreadsheet of who you bought for, what you spent, and what you'll be surprised in, and not just gifts, but events that you go to, anything that's holiday related. Keep track of what you're spending. And I think what you'll find is when you get to the end and you look at everything you spent, and you take that number and you divide it by 12, it's not that bad. The problem is we take 12 months of spending and we cram it into two. So that's where we start to feel really overwhelmed is you might not be overspending per se. You might not be blowing your budget or spending way outside your means. You're just spending outside your means for 2 months of your life. And that's where the debt starts to accrue because now we've got interest come January. So it's it's this vicious cycle that keeps continuing. So that's why things like Amazon lists are really great because you can keep track of, I heard my friend say something the other night that she really likes. Well, I quickly put it in my cart just for to remember. And what I do with Amazon is I wait for Prime days. I wait, Black Friday. Like I just keep tabs on what the sales are, and Amazon does it for you. It like sets up all the notifications, and then you buy it then. But don't forget that there's other holidays that fall outside of December. There's birthdays, anniversaries, graduations. There's other reasons to buy gifts. So maybe in December you're not going to buy your great nieces a gift, but you're going to buy them a gift at graduation or their birthdays, and you spread that spending out over the year. The challenge I always have in my home is I have one child born in January, one in July. You bet the July birthday gets better stuff because we're just tapped out come January. And every year I say I'm going to fix it, and every year I don't. So they don't seem to notice yet. The other tip I want to share is to really remember that the holidays aren't just about gifts. It's about events and gatherings, and the spending there can get out of control too. So you want to keep track of what you're doing in those areas and don't feel pressured to say yes to everything. One of the biggest social pressures I see right now is Facebook. When my friend or a friend of a friend is going to go to an event and Facebook tells me they're interested or going to an event, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I need to go to that event, and why aren't I going? And that's another $20 a person, but everyone else is going, I should go. So really just be careful. Like it's really easy to click interested and then somehow feel pressured to go and spend the money. Really make sure that that fits into your bigger plan, and don't let this one season of life derail all the other work you did. So if you're on this journey already where you've been budgeting, you've been paying off debt, you've been building credit, don't let this derail it because that's not what the holidays were designed for. And if you're thinking about it, if you're really thinking about getting into this space of getting control of your finances and living life a little differently, don't let this season start you off on a worse foot, and don't add to that debt.
That, oh my gosh, you said so much. And again, I think we could talk for hours, and I will have to have you back because you've brought up so many important points. Like, and again, Facebook, come on, we could there's so many ways we could dissect that, but the whole FOMO idea, fear of missing out, I mean, it's in our faces every day. And the other thing about don't forget the cost of events. I will tell you, I had just a few weeks ago just had maybe 12 friends over, and it's amazing how much money you spend on, like, oh, I'll get some pizza, some wing bites, and I'll do some dips, and I'll get some s'mores stuff for the kids to make s'mores. And before you know it, and a couple bottles of wine, you're like $400 in, and it's like, I'll say what now? You know what I mean? Like that's like two of my car loan payments. But like that happens, and it happens easily. And I know I'm guilty of having already had enough and certain things that day. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should make two more dips. Well, that's 15. I mean, $15 doesn't seem like much, but I didn't need them. And then the food was wasted because I already had enough food. So we tend to think that way. And you're right. That's something to consider as well, because there's money being spent there as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And I won't, but I could talk forever about that as well.
No, and I appreciate it, but yeah, you're right. Thank you. We'll have a little bit of I'll have a little self-control here, and I won't keep, because honestly, it's interesting to me how, like, and you joked about, the boring, whatever, but this isn't boring because it really is life, honestly, and value and relationships. And it's such, oh my gosh, we probably don't necessarily think of that when we immediately think of accounting or economy or finances, but it really is. It's life. It's individuals, it's families, it's every day, it's connections with these parties or gatherings we go to. It is so much, and we could talk about it for so long because it is life, and it's important. And obviously, we do need, there are certain bills that we just absolutely need to pay, right? I mean, we have to have the lights on and the heat on and the food and everything, and transportation, but then the rest of it like to your point about mental health, our joy too. We can't completely, take away everything like that too. So again, it is a rich conversation and we could continue, but I will stop because I know I'm giving you all these things to be like, all right, I have a tip for that.
Yeah.
I will just say, allow you one more last opportunity. If there's anything that you'd like to say as far as people, final thoughts or ways, if you would want people, I know you're not in a place for people to reach out to you, or maybe you are, certain anything you'd like to promote or share, I'd like you to have that opportunity now.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually really excited because the company that I work for is going through a really exciting merger. So, by the time everyone hears this, I think I'll be working for Money Management International, MMI, and they're a very large credit counseling nonprofit organization. I'm very excited to be a part of that and kind of make this move with the rest of my company. And in that role, I'm going to be doing a lot of this. I'm going to be doing podcasts and YouTube videos and kind of just throwing out all the tips and talking to people. So one of the things that I really want to make sure I'm learning as I go is everyone else's stories. I know my story, I know my truth, I know my struggle, and I know what brought me here. But in my job and in my life, I've been fortunate to kind of just meet people from different walks of life that have had a very different financial upbringing and experience than me. And it's helped me to really think about the different ways we can manage our budgets, our credit, our debt, our needs versus wants. So I am on LinkedIn, and if anybody wants to reach out and talk about their story, if they're struggling with finances and just need someone to talk to or someone to point them in the right direction for their situation, I'm really more than happy to do that. So LinkedIn's the best way to find me.
That's great. So Emily Hickox, it's Hickox, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, and again, I can't imagine there's anyone out there that doesn't find themselves at least once or twice in their lives that could use some advice like this. I mean, honestly, I'd like to carry Emily around in my purse because I need this kind of advice all the time. But I want to thank you so much. This was an incredibly enjoyable, I don't know if that's a word, enjoyable is what I meant to say, enjoyable conversation, but also helpful. So I do want to thank you for your time and for your knowledge. I think this is, honestly, it's not boring at all. It's fascinating. I could talk to you honestly all afternoon. And it is so important. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your information with us today.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Well, you're going to have to come back in 2024 and we'll have to figure out. I'll have to think, all right, what do we really want to dive into? Because there are so many avenues we could take with this. So, absolutely. Well, thank you again. And I want to thank my listeners as always. I will, so remember, reach out to Emily on LinkedIn if you're interested and if you have any questions. And I will keep in my show notes. I always say that I keep a link as well to my Buy Me a Coffee platform. That is just a way for you to support the podcast with $5 investment or anything that you want to help see this continue. Otherwise, I say even if you don't have the $5, because you should check in your budget first, you have other ways that are absolutely valuable as well that you can help support the podcast by sharing it on your social media, telling a friend who listens to podcasts or doesn't, maybe wants to start, making a recommendation, writing a testimonial or a review. Those are all great ways to help support and get the word out about this podcast. I would greatly appreciate it so that I can continue each week to have fabulous women as guests who will inform, inspire, and entertain. So thank you again for listening. And as I always say, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.